Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our final day of coverage here at MUFON Symposium 2023 in Covington, Kentucky. We have with us as our first guest today, Irena Scott. She has an indomitable reputation in the world of UFO, UAP study, and is the co-author of the new book, Beyond a Reasonable Doubt, The Pascagoula Alien Abduction. I am so excited for the fact that this amazing case has just really popped back to the forefront of the UFO UAP field. Familiarize our audience a little bit, Irena, with your career and things that you have done in the field.
Well, my career is I've always been in science, and I was I worked for the Defense Intelligence Agency in satellite photography. And I also worked for the, I forget what it's called now, the charting center. I forget the name.
Yeah.
And I have a PhD in veterinary medicine from a veterinary school. I was a professor for a while.
Okay. And
toxicologist. So my career has been just in science.
Spanning, but within the world of science, within the world of scientific investigation, things like that, how did you come to the world of UFO UAP study, Irena?
Well, it started when I was a very tiny child. My sister and I, long before we heard of UFOs, had something flying around our room, and it behaved in a strange way.
Oh.
And it was like the room was dark. There was no storm going on. And it flew around like it knew where things were. The room was dark, but it knew where the furniture was, and it knew where the walls were. It didn't bump into anything. And it got close to us. And it also went up and circled a chandelier. And we both woke up at the same time when the thing was in there. We had no idea how it got in. And then we both became terrified at the same time and ran out of the room.
Wow. And is this a situation that y'all talked about throughout your life? Was it something that y'all just kind of ignored, as is so often the case?
At that time, people didn't talk about UFOs, but we didn't know it was a UFO. We never heard of UFOs, so we talked about it. And then we had a real long close encounter later when we were older that we didn't talk about. I was working for the DIA in satellite photography, so identifying aircraft, so I didn't exactly go around talking about it then.
Wow. And what was that like for you, the second experience?
They were both, the first one was just terrifying, even though I didn't know why I was scared. The second one, somebody tried to kill us during the sighting.
What?
And we're still confused about what went on. Why?
What was the situation that happened?
Well, we were on vacation. Last thing on our minds were UFOs. And we were heading out of Boston. And we were watching airplanes go into this small airport. There was this little, it wasn't a little, but something flying below where the airplanes were. It was just a steady white light and not blinking like airplane lights.
Yeah.
And we were arguing about what it was. And then we passed a woods, and there was a big ball of something almost on the ground. And the inside of the car turned green. And then we went on. And my sister, I was sort of arguing with her and saying this thing that we were seeing wasn't anything. And she started yelling at me to pull over because she said it was going to cross over the freeway.
Yeah.
And so finally, after she yelled enough, I did. And it did. And I changed my mind. It had a little red light and a little green light on both ends that didn't blink, and 7 big picture windows. And we argued. We looked at it for a while and thought, are these panels or windows? And we thought they were windows. It was nothing like a blimp, and I've got videos of blimps with lighted sides. It was nothing like that. And so I was in the DIA working in photography, and I had a Polaroid camera it was back a long time ago. I had a Polaroid camera with high-speed film, and so I found the film and got the camera loaded, And I thought this would just be an amazing picture because it'd prove UFOs exist. I could get the stereo and everything. And so this truck driver pulled over in front of us, came back, and asked what I was doing. And I pointed at it, and he turned the opposite way and said, I don't see anything. Then he turned to me again and said, what are you doing? And I pointed, this big thing was right there. And he turned the opposite way and said, I don't see anything. And then he kind of gestured like I was crazy and went back to his truck. And so, anyway, by that time, my sister had said in her later write-up that the thing seemed to get in a different place. And I didn't notice that, but it was real close when I started talking to the truck driver, and it was a long ways away. But I still thought I could get a picture. And so I climbed a little hill to get off the freeway and took some pictures. And I didn't understand them at first, but later I was able to publish them in scientific literature. But I came back to the car, and we decided to go to another intersection, turn the car around, come back. And so this truck driver got right behind me and started chasing me. And he bore his bright lights down in my car so that I couldn't even see. And if I changed lanes, he changed lanes. If I slowed down or sped up, so did he. And finally, I decided, I thought he was going to kill us. I said goodbye to my sister.
Yeah.
And finally, I decided what to do would be to go in the left-hand lane and find an exit and just all of a sudden swerve out, which is very dangerous and somebody coming up.
Yeah.
But I did it, and I think I got rid of him. And so we went back and followed it a while, but we couldn't catch up with it again. Very close.
Incredible. How did that experience, A, change you personally? B, did it change your mind scientifically on the topic?
No, because I'd had childhood sightings, which I finally found out what UFOs were.
Sure.
But I kept quiet about it.
Yeah.
I was in the UFO closet for a long time.
And that is understandable. With the modern conversation going on, a lot of people are coming out of that closet, Irena, and it's fantastic to see that their stories are being listened to. I have told no less than one handful of people over the last month and a half, go to MUFON. Go to MUFON, give them your report. I saw it 20 years ago. That doesn't matter. Like, your report 20 years later can confirm reports that happened when it happened.
Well, you don't expect to find too much, but like I had written up the next day the whole thing, except I hadn't put in the times. But like Bud Hopkins, an investigator, asked me, do you have missing time? And I said, I don't know. And so anyway, just last year, my sister found a letter she'd written to my mother that very day. And so we had 2 write-ups, and she gave the time on hers.
Awesome. And how were your pictures received? You said that you published them.
Yeah.
How were they received by the scientific community when you published them?
Well, at that time, I didn't say UFO. I said UAP. I mean, that was back a ways, so I didn't, But it was accepted and published.
Wow, that's remarkable. That is actually very interesting that it was even published in scientific journal and all that. Yeah. Now,
I could just see one light when I saw it with my eyes, but the Polaroid camera picked up 2 lights, and they weren't in synchrony.
Well,
and so I said, this craft or whatever it is emitting light that's not in the visible spectrum.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that we talk about regularly on the show, is that we as humans see a very narrow band of the actual spectrum electromagnetic wise. Like, when you start looking at animals like even geese and some birds actively see magnetic fields to be able to guide themselves. So there's a whole panoply of spectrum out there that we are just shifted from by being in the middle, and it's remarkable to see a lot of the science really turning that way in the world of UFO UAP research.
Which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into how you got involved with the Pascagoula investigation.
Well, how I got involved was 2 ways. one was way back in October of 1973 when the Pascagoula happened, but I didn't know it. My mother called. She was in Ohio and I was in Missouri, which is 600 miles away. She said, "Did you hear that noise?" And I told her, "You must be crazy."
It's 600 miles away. What noise?
Yeah. And so I, really ribbed her and everything. And then she's a real skeptic. And several days later, she said there was just a huge UFO wave there, that people were hiding in their basements and keeping their kids in and everything, just like a war.
Wow.
And so I didn't pay too much attention to it for a number of years. And then one day I was in the library and I thought, maybe I can find the date of when she called. And I didn't expect to, because I didn't even remember when it was, but I thought it was October 73. I went in, pulled up a couple papers, and I found a newspaper article about it so I could date it. And it turned out that that was the same date as the Pascagoula abduction. And I had the help of some geologists at Ohio and wrote up a paper on that in the scientific journal. But then just several years ago, I was publishing under Philip Mantle, and the Pascagoula event happened in Mississippi, where they have an accent.
Yeah.
And he has an English accent, and so he wanted somebody from the United States to interview people.
Sure.
And so that's the second way I got in.
Wow. And what did you find out through those interviews? Let's get into a little bit of the case and some of the experience of Calvin Parker and Charlie.
Should I go into what happened to him?
Oh, please.
Okay. What happened was they were just two normal people. They had no interest in UFO. I think Charlie had told his son that UFOs don't exist. And they were just nothing, no interest or anything. And they, after their day of work, they decided to go fishing. And it was getting dark, and they were out on a pier fishing. And Calvin had a new car, and they'd pulled up to this beat-up old place with a no trespassing sign, and they had to walk a long ways through weeds and debris to get there. And he was afraid the police were going to get him. And he told Charles that if they did, he could go to jail because it was his idea to fish there.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, they were out fishing, and they saw this blue light. And they both thought, it's the police. And then this blue light came real fast. It was looked like an object, and it was levitating. It wasn't on the ground. And two things came out that, had arms and a head and stuff like people, and grabbed Charles, and one grabbed Calvin and took him in to the craft. And what they remembered is that they were sort of scanned. That Charles had it was real bright inside and they couldn't see anything, but this thing like an eye came out and looked at him and then circled around him. And Calvin said this thing like a deck of cards. Now you'd probably say like an iPhone came. It was like giving the impression that they were being scanned.
Sure.
And of course they were absolutely terrified because they thought they got injections and they couldn't move. They were paralyzed. And so then they were released and put back and the thing went away. And so that was the basic event.
Yeah, I remember in the hypnosis tapes, them referring to hearing an injection.
Yeah.
Hearing the sound of something injecting them, and then they weren't able to move. And things went awry from there. From that point, it came. This is very much where a lot of the stories of probing, things like that, came from. And how many cases have there been of people being taken in this way, Irena?
There's some cases, but this was a really good one because there were two witnesses. And they reported immediately. A lot of the literature, somebody will just be hypnotized and remember it, not remember it consciously, remember it years later and not talk about it. Well, they reported it immediately. One of them wanted to report it, one of them didn't. But.
Yes. Yeah. Calvin kept his story to himself until literally just recently, within the last couple of years, as he's gotten older and kind of ailing in health a little, has decided that he needed to come forward and confirm Charlie's story, because Charlie went public almost immediately.
Yeah.
And Calvin was like, I want none of that. He was a very young man, just beginning his career. He didn't really want any of that, I guess, at the time, what would really be infamy.
Well, he was 18, and, he didn't want to go through life with everybody pointing at him.
So that's
the crazy person.
Well, and that's just it. Like, we've had Kathleen Martin on the show numerous times, the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, and even she said her aunt told her at a very young age, like when she was a teen, this ever happens to you, you tell nobody. This will ruin your life. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what Calvin was afraid of, that it would ruin his life, especially in a small town like Pascagoula. In rural communities,
shipyard worker.
when you're a shipyard worker, and how did that affect the rest of Calvin's life up until the point of releasing his story?
Well, they did. Calvin didn't want to report it, and Charlie did, and so finally, Charlie tried the Air Force, the Kessler Air Force Base, and they said, no way. And they told him to call the sheriff's department. Well, the sheriffs did an excellent investigation, just really good, considering, nobody investigated that. They questioned him separately, then they put him in a room together and questioned him, and then the man left and left him alone. And they had a hidden tape recorder, because the police didn't want, them to be hoaxing and make, look awful.
Yeah,
and
trying to catch them confirming a story together before they tell it.
Yeah, like they would be laughing and saying, we were... Yeah. Well, they were both terrified, and it showed very much in that secret tape. And so that showed that they believed that happened, that they were being honest. And so... then a number of people went investigated, and they took him later to Kessler Air Force Base, and they were questioned. They were questioned by doctors and all kinds of things. And everybody thought they were sincere, besides which they had the tape. But Charlie, he had been in the military, and he'd been in life-death situations, and he thought he could hold up to the harassment.
Yeah, he'd been to war.
But Calvin... he didn't want to spend his life being a freak. Yeah. And so he didn't want to say anything. And he didn't until just a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And after speaking with him how has coming out with his story changed him?
Well, I think it changed him for the better. I think he was holding it in all those years. Yeah. And finally he said something. And he was expecting a real bad reception. And I think they went to a funeral. And he always disguised his name. Well, he used visiting hours or something. He put his real name on. And people recognized him, because he would have been world famous.
Yeah.
And the people... instead of harassing him, expressed interest and concern. And I think that helped him. And then his wife and Philip Mantle both said, come out and say something. And it's improved his life and his wife's life, too.
That's fantastic. And that's really great and healing to hear for anybody out there that has had an experience, whether it's to the extent that Charlie and Calvin had one, or even just a sighting, Irena, like the ones that you had. They leave people in a state of stasis. It rocks your world. You don't really know whether to believe yourself. It's hard. Just about any experience with the paranormal, cryptids. I've talked to all kinds of people that have these experiences, and it is typically not fight, not flight. It's freeze.
Yeah.
They freeze, and from that point on, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to process the information. They don't know how to integrate their experience into their life. And that can affect people in a lot of ways.
Oh, Kelvin had a nervous breakdown, was hospitalized shortly afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And it's it can be hard to even talk about that, you know, and to see the fact that he has come out so honestly about his experience and is sharing it is fantastic, especially in the climate that we're in right now. Sharing these experiences and the stories means a whole lot more than it used to. It's really brought a lot of people out who are experiencers, who have seen something, have been touched by something in many occasions. So it's fantastic and has really widened the world of UFO UAP research.
Well, I think if there's more witnesses, like there were two of them, like my sister and I, there were two of us.
Yeah.
When we went screaming to our parents, they said, you know, we were lying, that wasn't true. But we hadn't even been talking to each other, and we both saw it, you know. So it was true. We weren't dreaming.
Yeah, exactly. You were, and that was very much the same thing as the one, and I will still to this day just say UFO. I will not say alien. It was not a craft. It was not, from what I could tell, a solid object. It was an amorphous black blob that changed shape and moved through the sky, blocking things out. I saw it. My friend saw it. As did my other friend whose house we were at, as well as the autistic neighbor.
Wow.
And the next year, and granted, it was New Year's Eve. We'd had a few drinks, whatever. When we got together the next New Year's Eve at my buddy's house, and the neighbor that we went to high school with saw us, he was like, "Hey, guys, what's going on? You think we'll see a thing in the sky again this year?" And it was like,
yeah.
Wow, we weren't drunk.
Yeah.
Like, this gentleman had the phone numbers to all the public phones at the high schools locally memorized and would call them up at lunch, and like a memory like a hawk. He did not lose information once it went into his head. So it was the fact of like, wow, Ari saw that. We did not imagine that. My friend just wrote a story about it. But that's even been something that, by example, we've sat down and talked about it maybe twice since it happened. And that was almost 20 years ago that it happened, Irena. It's never driven a wedge between us like it has with so many people. But it's one of those, until recently, we may have separately told people stories, but whenever we've sat down for a drink and hung out, it's never been a topic of conversation between us, that night of experience, you know, and what it may have done to either one of us, just how we think, how we believe. Once you have an experience, it changes you.
Yes,
it changes you.
You become more open-minded.
Absolutely, and that is exactly how it has been put to me by people who've had near-death experience, people who've had astral projection experience, things like that. Even UFO UAP encounters. It's the way it's been put to me is I didn't realize I was living in a box. And that there was a whole world outside of that box that I'm connected to that's there.
That you
Nobody ever told me I was in a box. And now there's no box anymore. And it's wild. And it is amazing. It really does open your mind, open your heart to a lot of new things. What are you looking at next, Irena?
Well, this took place in a public place, unlike most abductions, and there were a whole lot of other witnesses. And so we interviewed a lot of witnesses, and a lot of people had reported that day to the police. So anyway, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I have another book coming up.
Awesome.
It's about it's called Aliens and Armageddon.
Okay.
And it's about how, maybe it's the end of the world, and maybe they want to influence us so we don't kill each other and things like that. Okay. So, and one of the questions I've been asking many of the researchers, because the theme of this year is
friend or foe.
Yeah.
Last year, it's friend or foe 2.0. Last year was friend or foe, and it was very much how has the media treated the UFO, UAP topic over the last 50 years since Roswell, things like that. And do they see it as friend or foe? Why the crazy switch suddenly to even using the term UFO denier?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, 5 years ago, you'd have been calling him Crazy Bob.
Yeah.
Now, this dude who didn't believe Bob is a UFO denier suddenly. And that switch, and now it's very much, how is the government looking at it? How is the populace looking at it? Are we looking at it as friend or foe? And the government is very much, at least right now, in the foe category. It seems like they are very worried about training ranges. They're very worried about public airspace, things like that. So where do you fall? Do you fall in the friend or foe category ultimately, Irena?
Both. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
They're just, it happened.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. I don't understand it. And that's it.
Yeah.
I had poltergeist experience right after the UFO sighting with my sister, too.
Really?
So, the whole conglomeration was pretty confusing, especially if I was working for the DIA, and I had this real high security clearance, CSI, like it's been in the news and everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and what was your poltergeist experience, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I came back to Washington, D.C., and it was late at night. I was supposed to bring back 2 coworkers from the DIA, and I don't know what happened, but I didn't get them. They were mad at me. But I could hear somebody walking around my room at night after dark, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I had a clock with an alarm, but it was very hard to set because the little knob was off, and it went off at 1:30, and I got up and thought it was morning. Then I realized it wasn't, and got scared to death and put a chair against the door and everything. And then my alarm went off at 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, 4:30, I think 5:30, just set exactly, precisely, which I couldn't do.
Wow.
And then I'd never heard of poltergeist. I was just sitting there thinking, am I going to lose my job if I went crazy?
Yeah.
And then my toothbrush just flung across the room and hit the wall. And then everything went to normal, and, I went to work. And I wasn't
Any other
crazy.
Instances after that? That was just an isolated instance?
It was right after the UFO sighting.
Wow. That's interesting because, many is the case that a UFO experiencer does experience other things that are paranormal, be it cryptid sightings, poltergeist activity, ghost sightings. It's a phenomenal topic, the idea that these worlds cross over as far as these topics. And it's been interesting to see that really coming to the forefront as well. Dr. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
We met last night, and it was such a pleasure to sit and talk with you, and I'm so glad that we got to have you on the show. I can't wait to have Philip Mantle on in a few weeks, actually.
Great.
So it's going to be awesome. Look there at the camera. Let everybody know where they can go to find your work, where they can go to keep up with you, and all of your research.
Here's my book. It's with Philip Mantle. It's on Amazon.com. And I have a website, irenascott.com.
Okay.
And you can just punch any of the books, and it goes right to Amazon. And
awesome.
You can find it.
Awesome. That's so fantastic. Once again, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. While you are online checking out everything at irenascott.com, make sure to stop on by curiousrealm.com. That is where you can like, follow, and subscribe to the show. That is where you can find our bookstore, curiousrealm.com/store, where you can find not only Beyond Reasonable Doubt, the Pascagoula alien abduction, but all of the books by our guests, as well as equipment that we talk about on the show, things like that. Stay tuned through these commercial breaks, everybody. We will be right back with our continuing coverage of the final day here